What if I told you the secret to living past 100 isn't hidden in some expensive supplement or some futuristic laboratory in Silicon Valley, but already written down, in detail, in a book that is over 2,000 years old? The Bible mentions specific foods over and over again, foods eaten by people who lived for centuries. Methuselah, the oldest man recorded in Scripture, lived 969 years. Abraham lived to 175. Sarah, 127, and when Moses died at the age of 120, the Scripture specifically says his eyes were not dim and his strength had not gone. Coincidence? Modern researchers at Harvard, at Oxford, at the Mayo Clinic are now confirming what these ancient people somehow already knew. There are 11 specific foods, I mentioned again and again throughout the Bible, that are now being studied for their power to extend human life. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what they are, why they work, and how to add them to your diet starting today. Stay with me. Number 7 changes everything. Before we begin, I want you to understand something important. This video is not about a magic trick or a quick fix or some pill you have to order from a foreign country. Everything I am about to share with you is grounded in two things: the wisdom recorded in Scripture and the modern science that is now finally catching up to it. Researchers studying the longest living populations on Earth, places like Sardinia in Italy, Icaria in Greece, and the Mediterranean coast, keep finding the same pattern again and again. The diets that produce the most centenarians on Earth look almost identical to the diets described in the Old Testament. The same olive trees, the same grapevines, the same grains, the same beans, the same seeds. What I am about to share with you is a list of 11 foods, every one of them named in the Bible, every one of them backed by peer-reviewed research, and every one of them available at your local grocery store right now. You do not need a prescription. You do not need to spend a fortune. You just need to know which foods to put on your plate. And by the time we get to number 11, you are going to look at your kitchen completely differently. Quick favor before we start. If this is your first time on this channel, hit that subscribe button below. It costs you nothing, and it tells us to keep making videos like this one. Now, let's get into it. We begin where the Bible itself begins. Olive oil. After the great flood, when Noah released the dove from the ark, what did it bring back in its beak? A freshly plucked olive leaf. From that single moment on, the olive tree becomes one of the most repeated symbols in Scripture. Olive oil anointed kings. Olive oil lit the lamps of the Holy Temple. Olive oil was used as medicine, as food, as fuel, and as a sign of God's blessing on the household. Now, here is where it gets interesting. The longest living population on Earth, according to a 2018 study published in the journal Experimental Gerontology, lives in a small Italian village called Acciaroli on the southern coast of Italy. Roughly 1 out of every 10 people there lives past 100 years old. And the researchers found something remarkable. Their daily diet is built around a single staple: extra virgin olive oil. They consume it with every single meal. Olive oil is rich in monounsaturated fats and a class of compounds called polyphenols. One of those polyphenols, oleocanthal, has been shown in laboratory studies to reduce inflammation in much the same way ibuprofen does, but without the side effects. And long-term, low-grade inflammation is now understood to be one of the root causes of nearly every age-related disease: heart disease, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, even certain cancers. A landmark study called PREDIMED, conducted in Spain over 5 years, followed more than 7,000 people. The group that consumed at least 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil per day showed a 30% lower risk of heart attack, stroke, and death from cardiovascular causes compared to a low-fat control group. 30%. From a single ingredient on the kitchen counter. How to use it. Replace your butter with olive oil. Replace your vegetable oil with olive oil. Drizzle it raw over salads, over warm bread, over roasted vegetables. The key word is raw or low heat. High temperatures destroy the polyphenols that make it medicine, and always look for cold-pressed extra virgin oil in a dark glass bottle. If your olive oil is sitting in a clear plastic container under fluorescent lights, the medicine inside it has already been ruined. The Bible promises a land flowing with milk and honey. Notice the order. Honey is listed alongside milk as the 2 foundational substances of a blessed life. Samson found honey in the carcass of a lion and ate it with his bare hands. And John the Baptist survived alone in the wilderness on a diet of locusts and wild honey. King Solomon, considered one of the wisest men who ever lived, specifically advised his son to eat honey because he said it is good for him. But here is the catch: the honey Solomon was talking about. The honey John the Baptist ate. The honey that flowed in the Promised Land. That honey looked nothing like the clear, watery yellow squeeze bottle on most kitchen tables today. Ancient honey was raw, unfiltered, unpasteurized, cloudy, thick, often crystallized in the jar, and it carried with it pollen, propolis, royal jelly, and live enzymes, all of which are killed by modern industrial processing. Raw honey contains over 200 different active compounds, antioxidants like pinoxembrin and chrysin, antibacterial peptides, live enzymes that survive digestion and reach the gut microbiome. It is so antimicrobial that medical-grade honey is now used in hospitals to treat wounds that will not respond to antibiotics. A 2022 review in the journal BMJ Open analyzed 18 separate studies and concluded that honey was more effective at relieving cough and upper respiratory infections than over-the-counter cough medicine. A separate study, this one out of Tehran, found that daily consumption of raw honey lowered fasting blood sugar in pre-diabetic patients. The opposite of what you would expect from a food this sweet. The reason is that raw honey contains a natural balance of fructose to glucose that triggers a metabolic response completely different from refined sugar. How to use it? Replace your white sugar. Replace your maple syrup. 1 spoonful in tea, or 1 spoonful on plain yogurt, 1 spoonful straight before bed to support deep sleep. That last one is real, and the science behind it involves liver glycogen restoration through the night. But, and this is critical, only buy honey that is raw, unfiltered, and from a local apiary if you can find one. If it is clear, golden, and pours like water, it has been heated, and the medicine is gone. The fig tree is the very first plant named by name in the entire Bible. After Adam and Eve ate from the forbidden tree, the first thing they reached for to cover themselves was a fig leaf. Long before any other fruit gets its moment, the fig is already there. Jesus cursed a barren fig tree. He told a parable about one. He sat under one to teach, and King Hezekiah, in the book of Isaiah, was healed of a fatal illness when the prophet told his servants to apply a poultice of pressed figs to the wound. For centuries, scholars dismissed that healing story as folklore. Then they actually studied figs. What they found was extraordinary. Figs contain one of the highest concentrations of calcium of any fruit on earth, ounce for ounce more than a glass of milk. They are loaded with potassium, magnesium, copper, vitamin K, and a class of polyphenols called flavonoids that protect blood vessels from oxidative damage. They contain a unique enzyme called physin that helps break down protein and aids digestion. And the fiber content of just 3 dried figs equals 5 grams. About a fifth of your daily recommended intake in 3 small pieces of fruit. A 2016 study published in the Journal of Nutritional Science fed participants 30 grams of dried figs per day for 5 weeks. The results showed significant reductions in fasting blood glucose, triglyceride levels, and total cholesterol. Another study, this one out of Japan, looked at fig leaf extract and found it lowered insulin requirements in type 1 diabetic patients. The fig is not just food, it is, by every reasonable definition, pharmaceutical. How to use it? Fresh figs are best when you can find them in season, usually late summer. Dried figs are nearly as nutritious, and they store for months. 2 or 3 dried figs a day, eaten on their own or chopped into oatmeal or yogurt, is the traditional Mediterranean approach. Just be careful. Figs are concentrated in natural sugars, so a small handful goes a long way. If there is one single fruit that the Bible elevates above all others as a symbol of beauty, fertility, and divine favor, it is the pomegranate. The hem of the high priest's robe was decorated with embroidered pomegranates. The pillars of Solomon's temple were carved with hundreds of them. The Song of Solomon compares the cheeks of the beloved to a pomegranate split open. And when the spies returned from the Promised Land, the 3 fruits they brought back as proof of its abundance were grapes, figs, and pomegranates. The reason ancient people held this fruit in such reverence is now unfolding under modern microscopes. Pomegranates contain a class of compounds called pomegranates, which are among the most potent antioxidants ever measured in any food. Their antioxidant capacity is roughly 3 times higher than red wine and green tea combined. A 2017 study at the University of California, Los Angeles gave men with elevated PSA levels, a marker for prostate cancer risk, 8 ounces of pomegranate juice per day. After 2 years, the rate at which their PSA was doubling slowed by a factor of 4. A separate study at the University of Naples found that pomegranate extract reversed the buildup of plaque in the carotid arteries of patients with heart disease. One of the only known foods in the medical literature that has been shown to actually reverse, not just slow, the progression of arterial plaque. In 2016, a stunning paper published in the journal Nature Medicine identified a metabolite called urolithin A, produced when your gut bacteria break down pomegranate compounds, as a substance that triggers a cellular cleanup process called mitophagy. Essentially, your cells throwing out broken-down mitochondria and replacing them with fresh ones. This is one of the most promising mechanisms in all of modern longevity science. How to use it? Eat the seeds whole, not just the juice. The juice gets you the antioxidants, but the whole seeds add fiber, which slows the sugar absorption. 1 pomegranate, 2 or 3 times a week, is enough to keep urolithin A production active in the gut. If fresh pomegranates are not available, look for 100% pomegranate juice with no added sugar, about 4 ounces a day. When the prophet Ezekiel was instructed to bake bread that would sustain him through a long siege, he was not told to use refined wheat. He was given a recipe, and that recipe is recorded for us in detail in the 4th chapter of his book: wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt, all sprouted, all ground together, all baked into a single loaf. Today, that bread is sold in nearly every health food store on the planet, called Ezekiel bread, and it remains one of the most nutritionally complete foods ever invented. But the ingredient that does most of the heavy lifting in that recipe is barley. Barley contains a soluble fiber called beta-glucan. Beta-glucan does something remarkable inside your digestive tract. It forms a thick, viscous gel that physically slows the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream, and it binds to cholesterol-carrying bile acids, preventing them from being recycled back into circulation. The result is a meaningful drop in both blood sugar and LDL cholesterol after just a few weeks of regular consumption. The FDA has formally authorized a health claim linking beta-glucan to a reduced risk of heart disease. One of only a handful of foods in the world to receive that designation. When barley is sprouted, the nutritional profile increases dramatically. Sprouting unlocks dormant enzymes, increases bioavailable amino acids, multiplies vitamin C content, and breaks down phytic acid, the compound in unsprouted grain that blocks mineral absorption in the gut. A 2019 study in the journal Foods compared sprouted barley to standard barley and found significantly higher antioxidant activity and a much lower glycemic response. How to use it? Ezekiel bread, available in the freezer section of most grocery stores, is the easiest way. 2 slices replace any white bread you're currently eating. Or, buy whole barley, soak it overnight. I simmer for 40 minutes and use it as a base instead of rice. 1 bowl a day was a staple in ancient Israel. It can be a staple in your kitchen too. When Esau came in from the field starving, in the book of Genesis, he traded his birthright, his entire inheritance, his future, his family's blessing, for a single bowl of lentil stew. People often read that story as a lesson about impulsiveness, but they miss the other half of it. Lentil stew was so deeply satisfying, so profoundly nourishing, that a grown man, a hunter, a firstborn son, would trade everything he owned for 1 bowl of it. There is a reason for that. Lentils are one of the most nutrient-dense foods ever cultivated. 1 cup of cooked lentils provides 18 grams of plant protein, more than a hard-boiled egg. It provides 90% of the daily recommended folate, IAB vitamin that protects against birth defects, supports brain function, and reduces the risk of stroke. Lentils are loaded with iron, magnesium, potassium, and a class of polyphenols specifically associated with reduced cancer risk. But the real longevity story behind lentils comes from the study of the world's blue zones, the 5 regions on Earth with the highest concentration of centenarians. The lead researcher of that project, Dan Buettner, identified one single food category that every Blue Zone population eats nearly every day. It was not olive oil, it was not fish, it was beans. And among beans, lentils were one of the most common. He calculated that for every cup of beans consumed daily, life expectancy increased by an average of 4 years. 4 years, per cup, per day. A long-term study in the Journal Archives of Internal Medicine, following nearly 800 elderly men across 5 countries, confirmed it. Legume intake was the single strongest dietary predictor of survival in old age. Stronger than green vegetables, stronger than fish, stronger even than olive oil. How to use it. Soak overnight, simmer with onions and garlic and a bay leaf, eat as a stew or a warm side. Or buy canned lentils, rinse them and toss them on a salad with a drizzle of olive oil. Half a cup, 3 or 4 times a week, builds the foundation of a true longevity diet. This is number 7. The one I told you would change everything. Pay close attention. When the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness, eating manna every single day, they began to grumble about what they had left behind in Egypt. They specifically named the foods they missed: cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and at the top of that list, garlic. Garlic was so beloved by the ancient world that it was placed in the tombs of the pharaohs to nourish them in the afterlife. The slaves who built the pyramids of Giza were given a daily ration of garlic, by royal decree, for strength. Modern science has now identified the compound that made all those ancient people right. When you crush a clove of garlic, you trigger a chemical reaction that produces allicin, a potent antimicrobial, antiviral, and anti-inflammatory compound that does not even exist in the intact, uncrushed clove. Allicin is so powerful that in laboratory tests, it has been shown to kill antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria, including MRSA. A meta-analysis published in 2020 reviewed 12 clinical trials and concluded that garlic supplementation reduced systolic blood pressure by an average of 8 to 10 points. A reduction comparable to first-line blood pressure medications, but without the side effects. A separate large study from China followed over 6,000 people and found that those who ate raw garlic at least twice a week had a 44% lower risk of lung cancer over a 7-year follow-up period. But the most striking finding, for our purposes, comes from a German study that looked at the carotid arteries of older adults. Daily consumption of aged garlic extract over the course of 1 year did not just stop plaque progression, it actually reduced the existing plaque burden in their arteries. Plaque dissolving. How to use it. And this is critical. Crush or finely chop the garlic and then let it sit on your cutting board for 10 full minutes before cooking with it. That activation window is what allows the allicin to fully form. If you throw raw garlic straight into hot oil, you destroy the medicine before you have even made dinner. 1 to 2 cloves a day, ideally raw or lightly cooked, in dressings, in soups, in hummus, or rubbed onto warm toast with olive oil. I want to slow down for this one, because it matters. Throughout the entire Bible, the vineyard appears again and again as a symbol of provision, of blessing, of joy, of communion with God. Jesus called himself the true vine. The Last Supper centered around the fruit of the vine. Noah planted a vineyard. The Promised Land was identified in part by the size of its grape clusters, so large that the spies had to carry a single bunch on a pole between 2 men. What modern researchers have discovered is that red and purple grapes specifically contain a compound called resveratrol, concentrated almost entirely in the skin and the seeds. Resveratrol activates a class of proteins called sirtuins, sometimes called the longevity genes. Sirtuins regulate DNA repair, cellular stress response, and metabolic efficiency. When activated, they essentially make older cells behave the way younger cells behave. A study published in Cell Metabolism in 2008 showed that resveratrol extended the lifespan of mice on a high-calorie diet, and the mice that received it had liver, heart, and muscle tissue that resembled animals decades younger. While the human dose required to replicate that effect from grapes alone is debated by researchers, regular consumption of whole red grapes with the skin and the seeds intact appears to support sirtuin activity, especially when paired with intermittent fasting or moderate caloric restriction. How to use it. Eat a small handful of red or purple grapes with the seeds 2 or 3 times a week. Frozen grapes make a wonderful dessert, and they actually lock in the polyphenols better than fresh. Resveratrol supplements are widely available, but whole food sources are always preferred. The matrix of fiber, water, and other compounds in the actual grape changes how your body absorbs and uses the resveratrol. The grape, as God designed it, is greater than the sum of its parts. In the book of Numbers, when there was a dispute about who God had chosen to lead the priesthood, 12 wooden staffs were placed before the Ark of the Covenant. The next morning, only one of them had budded, Aaron's staff, and it had not just budded. It had blossomed and produced ripe almonds overnight. From that moment on, the almond became a symbol of divine selection and supernatural growth. Almonds are one of the most micronutrient-dense foods on earth. A single ounce, about 23 almonds, provides 37% of the daily recommended vitamin E, a fat-soluble antioxidant that protects cell membranes from oxidative damage. They provide significant amounts of magnesium, which is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in your body, including blood pressure regulation and insulin sensitivity. They are rich in monounsaturated fats and contain a unique fiber that feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut. A 2020 review of studies on tree nut consumption found that people who ate a 1-ounce serving of almonds daily had measurably lower LDL cholesterol, reduced abdominal fat, and improved markers of vascular function compared to those who did not. The Adventist Health Study, which has followed thousands of participants for decades, found that those who ate nuts at least 5 times a week lived an average of 2.5 years longer than those who rarely or never ate them. How to use it? Keep raw, unsalted almonds in a small jar in your kitchen. A handful as a mid-morning snack. Sliced almonds on oatmeal. Almond butter spread on whole grain toast. The skin contains most of the antioxidants, so leave it on. And avoid roasted, salted, or sugared almonds. The high heat damages the delicate oils, and the additives undo the benefit. Date palms are the trees of paradise in Scripture. The city of Jericho is called the city of palm trees. When Jesus entered Jerusalem the week before his crucifixion, the crowds laid palm branches at his feet as he passed. The palm appears more times than almost any other tree in the entire Bible, and the fruit it produces, the date, was so important to ancient survival that a single mature date palm could feed a family for an entire year. A date is a remarkable food. It is mostly natural sugar, yes, but it is sugar wrapped in fiber, polyphenols, potassium, magnesium, and a remarkable array of antioxidants. A 2014 study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry found that eating just 3 dates a day for 4 weeks reduced triglyceride levels and oxidative stress markers in healthy adults without raising blood sugar. In another study, this one in Jordan, pregnant women who consumed 6 dates per day in the 4 weeks leading up to delivery had significantly shorter labor times and were less likely to need induction. Researchers theorize that compounds in the date mimic the action of oxytocin, the natural hormone of childbirth. And in Yemen, in the village of Wadi Hadramaut, where dates are eaten daily as a staple, the rate of type 2 diabetes is among the lowest in the entire Arab world, despite a high-carbohydrate diet, because the fiber and polyphenols in whole dates blunt the glycemic response that white sugar would otherwise produce. How to use it? Replace your sugar in baking with chopped or pureed medjool dates. Eat 1 or 2 as a midday snack alongside a few almonds. The fat from the almonds and the fiber from the date together produce a slow, sustained release of energy. But the key word here is whole dates, not date sugar, not date syrup, not date paste with added preservatives. The whole fruit as it grew on the tree. For our final food, we go all the way back to the book of Exodus. When the priests of the temple were given their sacred garments, those garments were woven from one specific plant. Flax, also called linen. The flax plant was sacred. It wove the curtain of the temple itself. And the seed of that same plant, overlooked in nearly every modern reading of Scripture, turns out to be one of the most powerful longevity foods ever discovered. Flax seeds are the richest plant source of omega-3 fatty acids on the planet. They contain a compound called alpha-linolenic acid, which the body partially converts into the same EPA and DHA you would otherwise have to get from cold water fish. They are also the highest known source of lignans, plant compounds with both estrogenic and antioxidant properties. A 2013 study in the journal Hypertension gave participants 30 grams of ground flax seed per day for 6 months. The result was an average drop in systolic blood pressure of 15 points and diastolic of 7, the largest blood pressure reduction ever recorded in a dietary study. A separate Canadian trial found that flax lignans reduced markers of breast cancer growth in postmenopausal women. But here is the catch you have to know about. Whole flax seeds pass straight through your digestive tract without being absorbed. To unlock their benefits, the seeds must be ground, and once ground, the omega-3 oils are highly perishable, oxidizing within days at room temperature. How to use it? Buy whole flax seeds. Grind a week's worth at a time in a coffee grinder. Store the ground meal in a sealed jar in the freezer. 1 to 2 tablespoons per day, sprinkled on yogurt, blended into a smoothie, or stirred into oatmeal. That single, almost invisible habit, sustained over years, is one of the simplest and most powerful longevity moves you can possibly make. 11 foods: olive oil, raw honey, figs, pomegranates. Sprouted barley, lentils, garlic, red grapes, almonds, dates, and flax seeds. Every one of them named in Scripture, often hundreds of times. Every one of them validated by modern, peer-reviewed science. Every one of them sitting at your local grocery store right now, waiting for you to put them in your cart. You do not have to overhaul your entire kitchen tomorrow morning. Pick one, just one. Add it to your routine this week. Next week, add another. In 11 weeks, you will have built a daily eating pattern that the longest living people on earth have been quietly following for thousands of years. The wisdom is ancient, the science is new, but the power, the real power, is in the doing. If this video helped you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone you love. Their life may literally depend on it. And if you want to know which foods are quietly stealing years from your life, the ones you should never eat, click the video on your screen right now. I will see you in the next one. God bless. This video is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Consult your physician before changing your diet.